Well. The Philadelphia Eagles surprised the world as I try and adjust my webcam just a little bit by taking a linebacker in the first round for the first time in what might be forever. Not something many of us forecasted. We spoke about it last night on the show. We'll be joined shortly by Chris Babos to go over the selection, some of the reactions to the pick. I know he's been diving deep into some of the analyst coverage of Jihad Campbell. We'll look at some of the film potentially on tonight, although I might save that for some post-draft goodness and, of course, preview the night ahead. But to help us break down the pick, Sir Christopher of Babosington, how are you feeling after a very lengthy, a very drawn-out night number one?
When you have your general manager come out and say that they got somebody they felt was a top 10 talent in the 30s, you have to be pretty excited about the selection. Now, as you mentioned, I have dove a bit deep into the media reaction, which has been very interesting. Generally speaking, positive across the board. But there are some medical concerns that are notable, really, when you look at why he fell down into the 30s. So while I think it's a home run of a pick based off of the talent level, it might be one of those things where Philadelphia fans might need a bit more patience to allow him to continue to get healthy after a surgery on his shoulder, questions about his other shoulder, and even questions about his lower body. So there are some looming questions.
Yeah, 100%. And while there may be questions over the injury and durability, I don't think there's any questions over his production. And there's no better man conveniently timed to go over some of that production, than David. David, I know you've been hot on the NFL draft. What are your takeaways after round one and the selection of Jihad Campbell?
Oh, I really like the selection of Jihad. I think it showed yet again that when the league zigs, how he zags. I mean, he's constantly setting the trend. He's not the one that is, following it and chasing his tail like a lot of the rest of the league is. The talent is indisputable. I missed everything y'all were saying when I was logging on, but so if I sound redundant, my apologies. But the talent is, you can't even dispute that. I had him ranked as a top 15 player in the board, the only linebacker worth a round one grade. And I didn't have anybody else on my Eagles board at linebacker for 90 to 100 more picks. So he got, to me, the best player at a position that's really scarce with talent. So I think it was probably, one of the better moves he could get. Obviously, that they liked him so much, they tried to jump up 10 spots earlier in the draft. It just didn't work out. They were trying to get with the Packers to take him, at 22 or 23 there. So, but yeah, I love it. It also, I think, screams that the influence that Vic Fangio has in that war room now. I don't think that, that gets talked about enough, but he has full autonomy on the defense, which is something I don't believe any coordinator has had on the defensive side of the ball since Schwartz did in 2017 with Peterson. So I love the move. It was a little surprising. I've seen a lot of people saying, is it fair to wonder what that means for Nakobe Dean? But in my opinion, Jihad Campbell is more of a Zach Bond clone than he is a Nakobe Dean. I mean, it's not to say that they're not covering their bases by getting two linebackers, because I'm sure they are. That way they have two under contract for the next 3 years. But he definitely is more suited to be what Zach Bond does on the defense. And he came out as an edge. He was recruited to be an edge with Alabama. So he's definitely more likely, an off-ball linebacker. But Fangio uses a lot of ways to get the weapons on the field and to disguise and confuse quarterbacks. So I'm extremely excited to see him get on the field this year.
Yeah, it's a really interesting pick. And you touched on a couple of really good points there. The first one just being the autonomy that Fangio has over that defense. I think I've spoken about this quite a lot, where the signing of Saquon Barkley last year felt more of how we jump in the gun in terms of a trend again, rather than just going after a star player. Because you could have gone for any star player. But I think we've seen a real trend of defenses getting lighter and lighter to defend these, zippy perimeter players. And I've yapped about this for so long. Again, so anyone watching, I apologize for repeating myself for the umpteenth time. But you've got so many zippy receivers, so many lightning quick wideouts. the defenses have had to get smaller, and nickel has almost become a base package in many ways now. And when you've seen a season like this from Saquon, when you look at a couple of the other running backs, like Josh Jacobs had a nice little year in behind, you kind of have to wonder. Someone like Bijan Robinson, maybe hasn't quite found his peak yet. He's certainly trending towards it. Now do you start bolstering the defense with size on the interior to combat what could be a push towards rushing the ball from other offenses that have now seen what the Eagles are trying to do? And if you're getting in front of that, like you say, you get yourself an off-the-ball linebacker that tackles very securely. He's got great instincts. He is very, I think, Zach Bourne-esque. I think a little bit more physical than Bourne. I think even going back to like the New Orleans tape from what I saw, Bourne had like all the agility and the athleticism in the world. I think he lacked a little bit of size sometimes, but you don't see that on tape at all. And I do wonder if, like you say, with Fangio and this experimenting with moving players around and having guys, dive deep into the trenches with a hand in the dirt, some of them sit back. The other thing I wanted to touch on that note with Fangio is I think the disconnect have now gone. Like you mentioned Jim Schwartz, the biggest heartbreak, in my opinion, of that entire era of Schwartz and Peterson had nothing to do with Carson Wentz. It was nothing to do with the downfall of that team, but the wasted talents in the draft, because it felt like the front office and the coaches were on completely different pages, like 90% of the time. You look at someone like Rasul Douglas as a perfect example. Rangy, tall, great in the air at the catch point, was never, ever going to suit that defense where he's kind of relying on safety help. They were disconnected with Rodney McLeod constantly. They couldn't quite link up. You'd have one of them moving over into a buzz, and then it would look like it was Rasul's fault, but technically the safety's out of position. You look at Sidney Jones, you go look at Jalen Reagor, and it just felt like over time, Howie was drafting a specific type of player. The coaches wanted a specific type of player. And if the coaches didn't get the one they wanted, it's, doesn't matter. We're not going to change the way we do things to accommodate him. We're going to play our way. If he doesn't fit it, so be it. Now, though, it's much more of this is our team. This is how we do things. We need a player that does these things, and we'll get the player that ticks these boxes. And I think that Campbell, off of what for me has still been a pretty minimal look, we'll do a deep breakdown here like over the coming days. But I think he fits that better than most other options, I think, at that range, because it got a bit ropey towards the end of that first round. A lot of the big names started to go. And I know I read back our Eagles staff chat this morning, and there was definitely some panic in that first round. Were there any players that you would have wanted instead of Campbell? Is there a player that you were honing in on? Like, I'll start with you, Chris. Was there a guy that you had circled and had your fingers crossed for?
I was with Brian, and it was rooting Starks was going to fall down the board. He got fairly close. I thought that safety helped, and he would have been excellent alongside of Reed Blankenship. I think it's an absolutely nasty combo there in Baltimore. I'm drawing a complete blank on who their safety is, but it is an excellent duo. Kyle Hamilton, excellent duo there. If that pick works out for them, and generally speaking, for the Ravens, those picks work out. So he was somebody that I had eyed up. And then there's still a lot of talent. As you read in the chat, we were kind of stunned that Shedeur Sanders didn't get picked, even as a late round selection. He should go, I would think, in the second round. And I think somebody's going to get a talent that they might need to work with a little bit because he's not getting protected by Deion now in the NFL. But he definitely has some talent, and it'll be interesting to see how that breaks out today.
Yeah. What about you, David? Any players that you had your eye on, or was Jihad Campbell? I know you said he was kind of the runaway, first round talent at linebacker. Were there any other names that you were potentially hoping for?
Not that was left at 31. The only other player I had with the first round grade was Will Johnson, and his medicals come back, and you have to believe that that's why he's falling. So that the only other one is another corner, Trey Amos, but that would have probably been in a trade down. I think even Mason Taylor, the difference between Jihad Campbell and Mason Taylor is pretty large if you take into account the position scarcity, because Mason Taylor, if you don't get him, you get Gunnar Helm or you get Elijah Arroyo. There is no other Jihad Campbell. You're going 3-4 rounds down. So no, I thought it was the best pick available. I actually thought they were going to trade out of it. So I just didn't see that they'd taken off-ball linebacker for the first time since 1979, but I am happy that they did.
Yeah, absolutely. And a very happy Friday as Daniel Berry comes in. We'll get to a few of your comments. I know Marina has been very happy about the acquisition of Jihaad Campbell. Delco Green says there's a brick breaking down football. And I've been doing it a while now. So if you're new here, we'd love to have you stick around. PhillySportsNetwork.com. You can get some Philly flavor with some more Delco accents and an unfortunate slip of tea and crumpets every now and again. So that's the place for all your Eagles coverage. But let's touch on the Kobe Dean, because I think that's been the unanimous takeaway. The immediate conclusion that gets drawn is just that, well, they've drafted a linebacker. Dean's in a contract year. He's coming off an injury. It doesn't bode well. I kind of like what David was saying in terms of he's more, likened to that Zach Bourne-esque role. I'm wondering, honestly, if just the structure of that defense moves just a little bit, where I think we saw there was a lot of almost two linebacker sets. They drop an edge rusher back into coverage. Someone like Jalix Hunt is absolutely perfect for that, because he's very much built in that same vein of can line up off the edge. He's got sideline to sideline speed. He can move around very swiftly. I wonder now, because hypothetically, if you're going to list the starters on this defense, you can do the front four, that's fine. You could have three linebackers who Dean in the middle, and as David alluded to last night, can come through, very much captain that defense and be the heartbeat of it. You've got a rookie on one side, you've got Zach Bourne on the other, and then you go out with your stock two corners. Maybe you move DeJean to safety if that's a potential option there. If you don't want to go in a nickel formation and you do want to load up on linebackers instead, that still have a wide athletic range and can make those, sideline lateral plays. I don't think it necessarily spells the end for Nakobe Dean. I think it more just gives the Eagles some optionality. I think the player it hurts more than anyone is going to be someone like Jeremiah Trotter Jr., because that ceiling that he had to go in and compete for snaps now definitely gets lowered. Dean, I think, still has a massive, massive shot to fight for a role. Whether or not this season pans out, whether he gets a contract, I think that is far too soon to say. But I think we're going to see just much more flexibility in the way the secondary is moved. And if we see a cornerback drafted today, if we see a safety drafted today, it might be much more telling as to how Fangio is potentially looking to draw that up. Just wanted to float that out there. And any thoughts on that? We'll go reverse. We'll go to David first on that one.
Go to me first? Yeah,
I thought I'd shake it up a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. I do think it gives them more versatility, more flexibility, and it, quasi protects them as well. I mean, he had an injury that it's a very small percentage of players come back from and ever to the level that they were before. So he definitely, has his work cut out for him. I saw him a few weeks ago. He was walking without crutches. He looked great, but that's not football shape. That's not getting hit shape. So, but I agree with everything you said as far as what they can do on the field. I mean, for anything that we think about it, Fangio has spent 12 hours a day thinking about it. So, I mean, he knows what's best for this team, and the role will change slightly if Dean cannot come back. Like you said, they will probably alter what the defense will do, and Cooper DeJean will probably play more box safety some. He could probably be, a big safety there, but I have complete confidence in what Fangio has shown his ability to alter defenses. I mean, he took Zach Bourne, who everybody thought was going to be an edge rusher, and turned him into an all-pro in one season. So I don't think it's much to debate what he'll be able to do with Campbell and Dean on the field at the same time either.
Yeah, and just to quickly hop in before I jump to Chris on that topic, we've also got to bear into account as well just the level of prestige that the Eagles' defensive coaching staff has been given over the last 12 months. It's easy to look at Zach Bourne and think it kind of stops there, but Nakobe Dean played his best football last year. Trotter ended up going from someone that I really wasn't high on coming out of college to being happy to see him on the field, happy to see those snaps. Jalix Hunt was a player that when he came out of college and got drafted by the Eagles, no one was really that excited about it. It was very much, he's a small school guy. He's taken way too early because he doesn't have that, pedigree of playing against bigger schools. You now see what he does in the postseason. You see what he does in those kind of extended snap counts at the expense of Bryce Huff. And he's done brilliantly and just kind of in a hybrid role. So I think the coaching staff has done a remarkable job with this linebacking group. And if there's ever someone that can get Jihad up to speed, it could well be Super Bobby. So we shall see. But what about you, Chris? Where are you at and kind of the structure of this defense?
I think the versatility that it gives Vic Fangio is pretty incredible, and the fact that he has the ability to still mold this defense, after a year and after a Super Bowl championship, they didn't lose a ton, all in all. Yes, Josh Sweat, goes, and Milton Williams goes. Like they're tough contracts to swallow losing, but ultimately I think the Eagles were well positioned, and I think that a pick like Campbell allows just more versatility. As somebody mentioned, up top, that it feels like the first day of school. The most excited guy in that Eagles draft room has got to be Vic Fangio, and what he can scheme up now, what he can confuse offensive coordinators with, because honestly, now it might not be a large part of the game plan, but you might have a page or two now dedicated to, hey, we got to watch out for Campbell coming off of the rush, or Campbell, dropping back here because he's got that sideline to sideline speed. So I just think that giving your defensive coordinator something more to work with, you can't really go wrong, especially when when he's got that kind of talent. Now, it really just comes down to whether or not he's going to be healthy.
Yeah, 100%. That's going to be the next big hurdle for him, but it's going to be certainly one I think we all believe he can overcome. We'll get to a few of your comments. Nice to see you, Davidson. Welcome to the chat this evening. Jay Fizz bringing the energy, said the draft stream always feels like the first day of school. It's a much shorter day of school this year, like we said. So I don't think you saw the pre one yesterday, but you might have been in the post. So format for this weekend, just for anyone that's new and trying to get a handle on our coverage, we'll do a pre-show before the draft, and providing I'm awake and not absolutely sleep deprived, we'll do a post-draft show as well, just recapping the picks with some quick insights about the players selected, or they move back and prolong that process by another 8 hours. But same format tomorrow. We'll have a pre-draft stream in the morning, and then we'll have a post-draft one afterwards as well, just recapping everything. And then Monday, we're going to go all out and start breaking down film. We're going to get juicy with it. We're going to go through college tape on every player we can find. And we've got the undrafted free agents and all of that stuff. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So we hope you guys stick around. If you're enjoying the content, we'd love to have you. Hit that subscribe button. I mean, there are Eagles streams near enough every day of the week by this stage. And of course, we've got more coming with the Phillies, with the Sixers, and all of that good stuff. Brian's thought I should nail the Bradford jersey to the wall behind me. It's crossed my mind. I did wear it on this. I've worn it both Super Bowls, and they won both of them. So let's look. Sammy Sleeves has his place in history. It's just, a little bit distorted. But to me, it will always be gold. But we'll get back to the draft now. And I think we've spoken, highly of Jihad. We've spoken highly of Nakobe Dean. I think really, really a point I wanted to touch on was that there's a book. You probably can't see it because the camera's too small. But I was reading quite heavily recently by Peter Thiel called 0 to 1. And it's just basically about startups and business and boring stuff. But one of the whole premise of the book is that you don't invest or start companies where there's competition, right? So you don't invest in a cafe when there's another one 2 meters away up the road that also sells the same coffee. You're not going to turn a profit. You go for one of one, disruptive, very different, only they can do it businesses. And the light bulb kind of went off when I woke up in the morning and I saw the pick of Campbell and I looked at who was on the board. That maybe there's an element. I'm not saying he's read the book. I'm not saying it's an inspiration, but there are definitely a pattern there over the last 2 or 3 drafts of how he's looking for where the board is. And instead of leveraging and trying to over mortgage on players like he has in the past, or take risks on someone like Sidney Jones and then just really swing for the fences and hope they turn into an all-pro, they're going for traits where they're so specific to that team. Like we saw with Zach Bourne last year, perfect example. You look at the offensive line, perfect example. They're all built in a very, very specific way. With the way they block, with the hunger, with the agility from a center. You do not find a Jason Kelce very often. You get him to handpick your second, replacement for him. It's about as good as you can get. And when you get a linebacker that can be versatile, that has all the energy in the world, that tackles, it's very rare you find a linebacker that is just well-rounded at just about everything. There aren't too many holes in his game. To come from Alabama, where there are no character concerns, to have an agent who they're very familiar with because she also represents Jalen Hurts. it's too good. And you kind of have to wonder, like, are they just now looking for every player they've selected for the last 2 years in some way has felt like a blue chip player. And you can go back before that. You can look at the class with, I believe it was Jordan Davis, that class that came out. And every player, I think Milton Williams was in it as well. Every single player in that draft class at some point was a team captain on their college team. And that was the first time I'd noticed that ever happen on an Eagles team. And I was like, okay, there's something happening here where they're looking for a really specific type of person, not just player. And it's working. And it's really a joy to watch this process unfold. So that was just a little ramble before we move on to the rest of the draft. And I promise I won't talk too much about Sammy Sleeve because I'll be here for half an hour talking about that Dallas overtime win, which still lives rent-free in my head. You can give me 2 Super Bowls. I don't know why I would pick that game as my favorite Eagles game of all time. But that Dallas overtime win, the Jordan Matthews touchdown, I don't know why. I might need therapy for it. Favorite game ever.
That's because they beat Dallas. Anytime they beat Dallas.
Yeah, we can go with that. Well, that's what I'll tell myself to sleep at night anyway, for putting it above 2 Super Bowls. But we do have a draft coming up, fellas, in around a couple of hours or an hour and a half or so. David, I'm very intrigued to know, because you've got an Eagles big board that you've built yourself from the ground up. What players are in range for this team? Where are you looking at for the second round? We'll get to the third a little bit later, because I know it all gets a little bit muddier. But is there anyone that slipped into the second? Like, I know you mentioned Mason Taylor as one of those players. Are there any guys that you would be sprinting to the phone to try and get at this point?
The only other one is the 2 corners I mentioned earlier, Will Johnson, if they trust his medicals, and Trey Amos, I think, and maybe even Benjamin Morrison, if they're comfortable with his medicals as well. I mean, he was a first round talent, and I mean, he may have been cornerback 1 in this draft had he had stayed healthy. So that's probably the only 3 aside from Mason Taylor that you would trade up for and lose draft capital to move up to acquire. If they wait a little bit, I really like TJ Sanders, and I still think defensive tackle is a position they will address early. I would be very surprised if they don't. I think we mentioned that yesterday. I think I had said that would be the number 1 position I had them addressing. My favorite player, Derek Harmon, who I had mocked to them, he went to the Steelers at 22, I think. So, yeah, to me, it would be cornerback or Mason Taylor are the only ones. They would maybe see it a little differently with interior linemen, Tate Ratledge or Charles Grant maybe, but that would seem a little high to have to move up for. It seems like one or both of them could be available to them when they pick at 64.
All right. Well, what about you, Chris? Any players standing out to you at this stage?
No, in all honesty, I've been overloaded with a lot of Phillies content, NHL playoffs and whatnot. So I'm mostly on the first round. I'm going to agree with what David said yesterday, and just say, I trust Howie. I trust the decisions that he makes, and I'm here for a good ride tonight.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a lot of fun. Let us know in the comments as well, guys, who you want to see end up in Midnight Green by the end of this evening. Delco Green has just made a very good point. And if he hasn't been on PhillySportsNetwork.com, he's going to have a stupendous time when he finds Ant DeBona's feature on the RAS system developed by Kent Lee Platt. He's a big friend of the channel and the website. I love Kent. He's brilliant. But yeah, you're absolutely right with that. And that's a really good observation. So Ant DeBona, one of our Eagles writers here, put together a huge article kind of detailing the Eagles' recent ramp up to target RAS specific players or guys that have these massively high scores, and also kind of dispelling the notion that every team does that, because yes, every team wants athletic players, but no, I think it's different. Like you can't just go, I want a player with a 40-inch vertical. Like it doesn't work like that. You're looking for specific traits. At linebacker, you're not going to value a 40-yard dash maybe as much as you would a 3-cone drill, for instance. Like it doesn't equate. There's a really good breakdown. I can maybe try and find a link if I wasn't such a boomer and it'd take me half an hour, and I'll put it in the comment section for you to have a gander. But it's a really good article, and I completely agree with that. And it's just cool, if I'm honest, to see the relative athletic testing getting much more love. Because I remember when I first started writing about the Eagles literally a decade ago this year, it wasn't even a thing. And it was like a couple years in, you see these little spreadsheets pop up from Kent at MathBomb on Twitter. and you'd like post them all, and you're, oh, this looks cool. That one guy's got all green. He must be good. And then they turn out to be amazing. So it's a lot of fun to look at. Bird Brain, I'm going to defer this to you, David, because I think your knowledge of prospects here is much stronger than mine. How do you feel about, I'm assuming that's Jake Ferguson, am I right? Or have I got that wrong?
Is it
No?
Terrence Ferguson? Maybe?
Terrence Ferguson? I don't know where I got Jake Ferguson from. Ignore me if you can't get Taylor. How do you feel about that move?
Yeah, I like him. He'd be more someone probably in the third, like they said. I like Gunnar Helm a little bit more. If they didn't get Mason Taylor, he'd probably be my second favorite target for the Eagles. He just checks off a lot of boxes. He excels in the 12 personnel. He's one of the better run blockers, and he has above average route running skills and ability to create yak afterwards. But Ferguson is on my board. I have him as like a tweener between the third and fourth round. And again, you have to default to Howie with that because nobody knows how that board's going to play out better than he does. So he definitely is a target if they're waiting later in the draft to go. I would be a little surprised if they don't try to make a run at Mason Taylor, but who knows how much the cost is to move up.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Bird Brain wouldn't have taken any of that in because he would have been punching a wall because it turns out that Jake Ferguson is a cowboy and I've committed a cardinal sin. So I will put that on the body clock and me not being fully present and fighting through it here to deliver the stream and apologize for sort of mentioning the cowboy Jake Ferguson.
And now restart it.
We'll start. Yeah, we're going to end this and we'll start again. But yeah, I think we're poised for another big night. I mean, it didn't take Howie long to start making trades. As we said, there was one that didn't go through with the Packers to try and move up and actually take Jihad Campbell. How are we feeling in terms of trades on day two? Because as we kind of all mentioned last night that this draft class is very top heavy and it kind of peters out very, very quickly. So this could be the last opportunity to be aggressive, I think, in some ways, while other people might forecast Howie moving out, taking back later picks. Obviously, they lost a 5th round pick last night, so that they maybe try and recoup that, which is a strategy that he's often tried to do in the draft. If he trades away a pick early, he'll pick it up back later in some capacity. I think there's a chance he'll be more aggressive here than people are realizing, just because it is your last chance to get a premium talent before the quality of player just kind of drops off a cliff for the most part. There's going to be exceptions, but overall, I think the pool of players just gets thinner and thinner the lower you go.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, and I agree also with his being more aggressive. I mean, the second round is where the Eagles historically have had some of their best draft picks in the history of the franchise. So I know that they focus a lot on that round. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get 2 picks tonight instead of just the one. And a position we haven't mentioned yet would be edge rusher, Josiah Stewart, Braden Swinson. There's some pretty big names there too if they want to add to that. But I agree also that the talent level is going to drop off. The meat and potatoes of this draft was now between picks 30 and 75. So I agree that he will probably be more aggressive today than he even was yesterday.
Yeah, and he never has a day off, does he, Howie? So he's surely going to be running up the phones. I think we're going to be hitting an interesting point now when it comes to where you draft after this. I know you mentioned defensive tackle still being a priority for this team. Is there another area that you'd be looking at, Chris, that you would feel I know you mentioned safety. There was a lot of love for Malachi Starks last night. Xavier Watts was the name that was obviously thrown around as well. There's a couple of other players that have really kind of warmed the hearts of Eagles fans. But is there another player? It all seems to be defense. Is there an offensive player at all that, you could see the Eagles maybe make a little run for, or a position? I know we mentioned tight end, but
it is, and it might get me kicked off the stream. Quarterback. Not to replace Jalen Hurts.
All of our faces just dropped at the same time. It's
but if there's somebody that you feel has talent that you can develop, you went into last season taking a flyer on Kenny Pickett, and it was one of the things you did have to utilize him. But was anybody really all of that comfortable going into those Kenny Pickett games? Please correct me if I'm wrong. I really wasn't. So I could see that as an opportunity, but I really think it does matter how the board falls.
I am not tolerating Tanner McKee disrespect on this stream, and I will put that out there right now.
I honestly forgot about Tanner McKee. So,
but no, I think you're very valid.
I will admit that one.
No, I think you're very valid in that. And, you know, I think realistically, McKee is somewhere where ability-wise, Nate Sudfeld would have been in his last year in Philly, where sort of somewhere between a 3 and a 2. He's not quite ready to be a backup yet. So I wouldn't be willing, you know, put it this way. If it was Tanner McKee going into games, my heart would say brilliant. My head would be absolutely sweating for, you know, the next quarter that he played. So completely agree. And if there's a guy that they can maybe develop, you know, iron sharpens iron. That's always been a slogan in Philadelphia specifically. I can see them, you know, potentially making a move later on. They do love a late round quarterback. You know, 6th, 7th round undrafted free agents. They love just bringing in a name. Clayton Thorson springs to mind for any of the OGs in the stream that will remember the god awful song that I used to shill around Twitter back in the day. I could see it. I could absolutely see it. I think we're also at a point now offensively where we mentioned last night they don't need too much. I'm not going to over leverage anything. The only position really that I was thinking about would have been slot receiver, purely because there isn't really any certainty there. Like Dotson didn't really hit. I know they've signed He Who Must Not Be Named, and I refuse to talk about him because I've never been so bearish on a player in my life as when he came out of college, and now he's an Eagle, and I can't bring myself to say the name. Ineas Smith, meanwhile, was someone that I absolutely adored. Didn't quite get up to speed in training camp. I think he had an injury setback or something, missed a little bit of time. I don't think there's enough there. It's not a position of priority at this stage when you've got so many weapons in that offense. But if you get 5th, 6th round, if you see an athletic freak on those RAS scores that Delco Green mentioned, I could see them maybe getting a little 5'8" receiver to cause some chaos over the middle. Are there any slot receivers, David, that you've seen this year, or is it a position you've not really looked at just because it's not really on the positional need side of things?
There's not a lot of receivers who I think that they would make, you know, a large investment on, especially when they weren't even willing to just give a 5th-year option to Jahan Dotson. But if I'll throw one player out there that probably will be a little surprising to a lot of people, that if he kept falling, I could see the Eagles have an interest in, and that would be running back TreVeyon Henderson. And I know running back is not a position they historically will invest a lot at, but a duo of TreVeyon and Saquon would be pretty amazing, and it would take a lot of wear and tear off of Barkley and probably prolong his career with the Eagles. TreVeyon, if he has a crease, much like Saquon, just a little bit of daylight, he's taking it the distance. He is a home run threat. He is an elite pass protector. He has a high character. His vision's elite. He waits on blocks. He anticipates the creases. He changes speeds to match the play calling. He is not a comp to Saquon because I don't believe there is one. But if there is a player in this draft close and they could use another weapon who can catch balls on the outside, 2 running back set with Saquon and TreVeyon Henderson would be a horrifying duo for opposing defensive coordinators.
Yeah, I love that. I really want to clip that just in case they do take him, because it just would have been the best foreshadowing like ever to do that. One thing I did want to go over really quickly is just the other teams in the NFC East, because that's something I think we often lose sight of when covering one team, is we just kind of focus on the Eagles and how well they're doing and kind of forget what's going on elsewhere. The Giants were obviously in a very noisy situation for a little while there. How do you feel about the rest of the division coming out of the first round? Were there any kind of things that shocked you or disappointed you or made you a little bit gutted that a player's gone to a certain team?
I think the Cowboys took the biggest leap taking Tyler Booker. When we were watching the draft, if you look at like a consensus board, it was the biggest reach in the first round. So he was projected to go, you know, somewhere between like 28 and 35, and they take him for 12th overall. The Commanders, Josh Connerly Jr., I think they got a really good player. Yeah. Past couple of years, their drafts have been really well done. I don't know, you know, if he contributes right away, but he can play most spots on the offensive line. The Commanders having a competent front office has really propelled them. As you saw last year, they were the opponent in the NFC Championship game. So yeah, they're doing really well. The Giants and the Cowboys, not as much.
Yeah, just before I get to you, Chris, I think the Commanders was a team I was kind of angling that question at, just because it was so reminiscent of well, you could name a number of picks. Landon Dickerson's probably the one that springs to mind. Cam Jurgens, obviously, Tyler Steen. Like, I think ever since the arrival of Jalen Hurts, the priority to keep that offensive line the priority has always been there. And the Commanders last year did struggle, especially in that championship game. They were battered and bruised by that Eagles pass rush. And it may have been a wake-up call. It's been a long time since the Commanders have been even remotely competent. So to see them go out and get a versatile offensive lineman, knowing that you might have something special with Jaden Daniels, therefore you might want to protect that investment rather than let him get, beaten to a pulp every single week, I think is a very smart decision. What about you, Chris? Any takeaways from the rest of the division, or is it all kind of summed up there?
Before Chris goes, I got to get off of this, but I just wanted to say that instead of just ending it abruptly. But
no,
I got to get
worries.
up. And the draft, I think, starts in 20 minutes, by the way.
Oh, bollocks. Okay, right. We'll wrap this up in a little bit then. Excuse my poor English French.
But
David,
thank y'all for the time. Y'all take care.
Thanks for hopping on. What a stud. Absolutely love him. David, if you want to follow him on Twitter, it's at PHL Eagles News, I believe. Because I keep accidentally tagging PHL Eagles Nation. I think they genuinely like whenever I tweet his articles on the PSN account, he genuinely blocked us from doing it. So that was fun. Jay Fizz says Partle's a good pick to go with the defensive end they already have and decked. It's a nasty line, so a tight end or a running back to beat that rush would help. So tight ends, there is still a name available in that second round. I know Mason Taylor has been the one that Brian has been clamoring for. It's going to be intriguing. So before we wrap it up, I thought the draft started at 8, so I was just petering along, yapping about the birds. I didn't realize it had started that soon. So before we head off, Chris, any predictions for night 2, be it like trades or a player specifically that you've got in mind?
There's no player specifically I have in mind. I think you were hit the nail on the head. I think Howie's going to be aggressive. He tried to be aggressive and got to sit back yesterday and still get the guy that they wanted. With a high draft grade. So if the board falls the way that he wants to, I think he'll utilize a bit of the picks that he has in his disposal to make sure that they get the guys that they want. And then if the guys that they're looking at go off the boards, I don't think he's going to hesitate to trade down or even push some chips into the pot for next season where they already are pretty well stacked at the NFL draft. So I think the Eagles are in a fantastic position, and it'd be very curious to see kind of how they go about this. I do think they do their best to try to get a tight end on day 2. I say if I've got a prediction, I think it's that how he works the phones to get a tight end in Philly.
Well, let's see. We get a little bit of Dallas got it. Take 2. Then they're picking around that sort of 50 range again. Obviously, pick 64 for the second round, and that just about will wrap it up. My prediction is going to be: I think they go for a corner. I'm still a little bit beside with Trey Amos. Obviously, Ole Miss transfer, Alabama, just a hell of a player, absolute hell of a player. Forgot he was coming out, to be fair, this class, and was very happy when I saw his name start popping up on mock draft. So I would be all about that. But I can absolutely see them getting a tight end as well. But only time will tell. So from us here at PSN, we will bid you adieu, and we will see you very soon. So we'll be streaming near enough on the dot when the draft comes to an end, depending when the article goes out. So for our priority is get the article out, then we'll come onto a stream and we will yap. So probably I want to say 3-4 in the morning, depending how long this goes on. Whenever the draft ends, PSN YouTube channel, there'll be a selection of us here talking about what Howie Roseman has done. So if you want to have some ambient noise to fall asleep to and a British guy just yapping into your ear about the birds, make sure to hop back. It's been great seeing some new faces in this stream today. Delco Green, Noble King. They are different people, although a Delco Green Noble King would be lovely. To Davidson as well. And of course to our regulars of Jay Fizzle, Daniel Berry, Bird Brain, Marina Sands. You've all been absolutely exceptional. I hope I haven't missed anyone. Oh, and Greg. We love Greg and Brian, but we don't mention Brian. Guys, I will see you all very, very soon. Enjoy the NFL draft. Go Birds, and we'll see you on the other side.